In this video, I will show you how to create this particle effect with the VFX Graph. It should be perfect for winter scenes in your game. Let's go! I'm using a starting project that has lighting already set up to make this kind of a wintry feel. So if you want to follow along with these exact project settings, there's a link to the GitHub repository in the description. But if you just want to create this exact effect for your game, there's also a link for this snowflake texture that we're going to use, so just make sure to download that. For this particle effect, we're going to use the VFX Graph, which is contained inside the VFX Graph package. If your project is using the high-definition render pipeline, this package will be automatically imported. If not, open up the Package Manager window by navigating to the window Package Manager. Then, make sure that you change the source of the packages to the Packages Unity Registry option at the top of the window. This will list all packages that Unity currently provides. Next, scroll down until you reach the VFX Graph package and select it. The right panel of the window will show the details of the package, so check that out if you want to learn more about the package. Finally, press the Install button located in the top right corner of the window to add the package to the project. With that, we have everything we need to start with the creation of the particle effect. We'll start by creating a new empty object and naming it something like VFX Snow. Then, add a new visual effect component to it. This component will create an instance from the VFX Graph and allow us to tweak the exposed properties to get the desired look of the effect. However, even though the control window for the particles appeared inside the scene window, none of the controls appear to work. That's because we haven't actually created a graph asset that will specify how should the particles behave and how many particles should be spawned. To do that, just click on the New button located near the top of the Visual Effect Component Inspector. Then, specify the name and the location of the Visual Effect Graph and click Save. This will automatically create a new Visual Effect Graph asset in the project and open the Visual Effect Graph window. If we quickly take a look at the Scene window now, we can see that particles are showing now and that the controls are working correctly. However, these are just the default Unity particles that look nothing like the snow particles we're trying to create. So let's open the Visual Effect Graph window to make them look more like snow. By default, when you create a new Visual Effects Graph, Unity will create this basic particle effect for you. It serves as a starting point for our effect and it provides an overview of the global stages we need to define. These global stages represent the lifetime of one particle and are neatly visually separated into systems, contexts, and nodes. At the top of the graph, there is a node inside the spawn system that defines how many particles will be created every frame. This will differ between a snowstorm and small snow dusting, so we're going to expose this spawn rate as a property. To do that, make sure the blackboard is visible by clicking on the blackboard button in the top right corner of the window. Then, click on the plus button in the top right corner of the blackboard window and select float. Click the drop-down and make sure the exposed checkmark is on, because we want to be able to adjust this property for different effects. Also, set the default value to something like 250. To connect the exposed property with the graph, drag and drop it into the graph window and connect it to the spawn system. Now, even though we set the spawn rate to 250, the current capacity of the particle system is set to 32. This means that there can be only 32 alive particles at any moment, and all other particles spawned above that limit will be discarded. Let's change this capacity to something like 1000. Save the graph by clicking on this save icon in the top left corner of the window and let's hop into the scene to check it out. We can see that there are more particles active now, and if we look at the inspector of the visual effect component, we can see the spawn rate property we created and exposed earlier. If we press this checkmark next to it, we can override its value. Set it to something like 5 and see the difference in the effect. That's the power of exposed properties. They allow us to easily tweak the look and feel of the effect without having to go back into the graph window. Revert the spawn rate to something like 250 and let's hop back into the graph to complete our snow effect. For our snow particles, we want to specify an area inside which they will spawn. Also, we want them to start falling downward slowly. Finally, the effect will look better if some snow particles faded out in the air before they fell to the ground. To set the starting spawn position, right-click on the initialized particle block and select the Create Block option. Start typing Set Position Shape and the different options for defining the spawn position will appear. For the purpose of this tutorial, select the Axis Align box. This will enable us to set a starting position of the particle somewhere inside or on the surface of the box we define. We want to tweak this box from the inspector, so let's expose this as a new property called Spawn Volume. The snow should cover quite a large area, so let's set the default size to something like this. Also, make sure to raise the center a bit, since the snow particles should spawn high up in the air and fall downwards. Then, change the position mode to volume in order to spawn particles somewhere inside this box. Next, let's expose the properties of the initial speed and lifetime of the snow particles. Add a new vector3 property called Initial Velocity and a new vector2 property called Lifetime. The initial velocity will be the same for every particle and set it to something like minus 0.07 on the y-axis. However, the lifetime needs to vary for every particle, so the x component of the vector will define the minimum value while the y component defines the maximum. Set the default values to something like 1 and 6 seconds. Now connect the newly created properties to the graph. If we take a look at the scene now, we can see that the particles are spawning inside a large area, but they're not currently falling downwards like snow. Let's fix that. In real life, the snow is falling downwards due to gravity, so let's add a gravity block to the update particle context. The force property inside the gravity block will specify how fast the snow falls. This should be different based on the type of the snowfall, so let's expose it as a new vector3 property called gravity force. And set the default value to something like minus 2.5 on the y-axis, since the snow should fall slowly in our case. Also, the snow doesn't fall directly down, it moves through the air carried by the wind. We can achieve a similar effect with the turbulence block. The default values should work fine for this tutorial, just make sure to change the noise type from value to Berlin. Again, save the graph and let's hop into the scene to see the current state. This already resembles the behavior of the snow particles. The last and probably the most important thing is to actually make the particles look like snowflakes. This is really easy. Let's expose a texture 2D property for the snowflake texture and name it something like snowflake. Assign the default value to the snowflake texture, which if you haven't already, you can download from the link in the description. Finally, drag and drop it into the graph and connect it to the main texture slot. Since the snowflake texture is a flipbook, we need to change the UV mode of the block from default to flipbook. Also, disable the Orient Face Camera Plane block, since we don't need it. The last thing left to do is to adjust the size of the particle. In the Set Size Random from Curve block, change the sample mode from Overlife to Random. Then adjust the curve to go from something like 0.03 to 0.04. Save the graph and let's check the results. Finally, we have something that looks like snow. And due to the exposed properties, we can easily tweak it to go from a light to a heavy snowfall. If you want to combine these snowfall particles with a shader that adds a snow cover to your environment, make sure to watch this video. It shows a step-by-step process on how to implement a realistic snow shader. And that's it! You've just learned how to create a scalable and robust snow particle effect for your game. And if you found this video helpful, please leave a like, it will help us a lot. Also, if this video gets 500 likes, we're going to make a video that explains how to create a much more complex particle effect in the Visual Effects Graph. It will give you a better understanding of how the Visual Effects Graph works, so that you can create advanced particle effects with ease. And that's it! Thank you for your time and good luck with your creations.